Before you judge me, before you decide who I am, just listen, because this didn't begin with desire. It didn't begin with some twisted thought or secret plan. It began with grief. It began with silence. And it began the day my mother died. I never woke up and told myself, today I'm going to fall for my father. That idea alone makes me sick. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't planned. It happened slowly, almost invisibly, like water rising inch by inch until you realize you're drowning. My mum passed away 8 months ago. Cancer. A quiet Tuesday morning in a hospital room that felt too small for something so permanent. I can still hear my dad's voice as he leaned over her fragile body and whispered, "It's okay, baby, you can let go." And then she did. Just like that. One breath, and then none. I watched the strongest man I've ever known fall apart without making a sound. After the funeral, the house filled with people bringing food we never touched. Church women hugged us and said she was in a better place. Family members told us to stay strong, but strength feels meaningless when the door closes and you're left with silence. That's when the real grieving began. I moved back home almost immediately. There wasn't even a discussion about it. My dad looked lost, like someone had erased the instructions to his life. He didn't know how to function without her. And I couldn't leave him alone in that empty house. The first few weeks were unbearable. He barely spoke. Most days he just sat near the window, staring at the street like he expected her car to pull up any minute. He stopped shaving, stopped cooking. Sometimes he wouldn't even turn on the lights unless I reminded him. So I stepped in. I made breakfast even when neither of us had an appetite. I cleaned the kitchen. I organized mail. I kept the television running just to fight the quiet. I told myself I was being strong for him, but the truth is, I needed him just as much. Because I wasn't okay either. I've been heartbroken 3 times in my life. Not the dramatic kind you cry about for a weekend and move on from. I mean the kind that makes you question your worth. The kind where you stare at your phone for hours waiting for a message that never comes. The last man I trusted, cheated, lied, disappeared for 2 months, and then reappeared engaged like I had never mattered. After that, something inside me cracked. I told myself I was done. No more men, no more chances. If I needed someone to talk to, I'd talk to my dad. He had always been there, calm, steady, safe, the only man who had never broken my heart. But grief changes dynamics in ways you don't see coming. Nights were the hardest. Through the wall, I could hear him crying, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, controlled tears. The kind of crying a man does when he's trying not to fall apart completely. And I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling every ounce of his pain. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked down the hallway barefoot and opened his bedroom door without knocking. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, shirtless, holding a picture of my mum. His back was hunched, his eyes were red. He didn't look strong. He didn't look invincible. He looked human. I didn't speak. I just wrapped my arms around him from behind. He stiffened for a moment. Then he broke. He pulled me into his lap the way he used to when I was little. I hadn't sat there in years, but it felt natural, familiar. He buried his face against my shoulder and cried. I held his head against my neck and let him fall apart. After a while, I whispered, "I miss her too." His voice shook when he answered, "She was my everything." When I pulled back and looked at him, I didn't see lust. I didn't see anything inappropriate. I saw connection, raw, deep connection between 2 people who had just lost the same woman. That night, I didn't go back to my room. I stayed beside him. We didn't cross any boundaries. We didn't even say much. I laid my head on his chest, and he held me tightly, like he was afraid I might disappear too. And that's when something began to change, quietly, almost invisibly. We didn't notice it then. But looking back now, that was the moment everything started shifting. From that night on, the house didn't feel as cold. It was still quiet. It was still missing her. But there was something different between us now, something unspoken that filled the empty spaces. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle, almost gentle, and that's what made it dangerous. I started spending more time in his room. At first, it made sense. We would talk late into the night, sometimes until 2 in the morning. He told me stories about how he met my mom, how nervous he was on their first date, how she nearly burned the chicken the first time she cooked for him. He described the night he proposed in the rain, how she laughed before she cried, how certain he felt that she was his forever. He would smile while telling those stories, even through tears. And I would sit there listening, laughing softly, imagining the kind of love that lasts decades, the kind of love that survives everything. And I couldn't help but compare it to my own life. 3 heartbreaks. 3 men who promised permanence and delivered pain instead. The last one cheated, disappeared, then came back engaged as if I had been nothing. After that, I convinced myself I was done trying, done believing, done trusting. But sitting there with my dad, listening to him describe real love, I started to wonder if maybe I had been searching in the wrong places all along. That thought scared me. I didn't notice when admiration slowly shifted into something more complicated. It showed up in small moments. The way I lingered during hugs just a little too long. The way I waited for his approval before making simple decisions. The way my chest tightened when he called me beautiful, even on days when I hadn't showered or brushed my hair. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Of course I valued his opinion. He was my father. Of course I wanted comfort. We were grieving, but deep down, I knew something inside me was changing. I started noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The strength in his arms when he carried groceries, the lines on his face that made him look distinguished rather than old, the steadiness in his voice when he spoke. He wasn't just my dad anymore in my mind. He was a man. A kind, patient, hurting man. And he was the only man who had never broken my heart. One evening, we were sitting on the back porch, watching the sun go down. The sky was painted in soft orange and gold, and the light hit his face in a way that made him look peaceful. For a moment, I caught myself staring. Not casually, not absent-mindedly, staring. When he turned slightly and our eyes almost met, I quickly looked away, pretending to adjust the blanket around my shoulders. My heart was racing, and I didn't understand why. That was the first time I felt afraid of my own thoughts. I told myself to stop. I buried the feelings. That's what you're supposed to do when something feels wrong, right? You push it down, you ignore it. You smile and pretend nothing is shifting beneath the surface. But grief doesn't just break you. It bonds you. It creates intimacy in ways that feel justified at first. We were each other's support system. We cooked together, cleaned together, sat in comfortable silence together. We understood each other's pain without needing explanations. And somewhere between comforting him and being comforted myself, the line between father and man blurred. The moment I truly noticed it was during a movie night. We were watching one of my mum's favorites. Halfway through, a scene reminded me of her laugh, and I started crying. I didn't hold it in, I just leaned into him. He wrapped his arm around me and pulled me closer than usual. His hand rested against my back, moving slowly in a way meant to soothe. I tilted my head up to thank him, and when I did, our eyes locked. The way he looked at me wasn't the way a father usually looks at his daughter. There was no lust, no immediate desire, just awareness. An awareness that we were both adults, that we were both lonely, that we were both searching for something solid to hold on to. In that quiet second, something unspoken passed between us. Neither of us said it, neither of us acknowledged it, but we both felt it. That was the beginning. And the worst part, I didn't want it to stop. Once that awareness existed, it didn't disappear. It lingered in the air between us, quiet but undeniable. We never spoke about it. Not after the movie night, not the next morning. Not at all. But something had shifted, and we both knew it. The house felt smaller after that. Every shared space carried tension. Not loud tension, not anger, just something charged. When we passed each other in the hallway, our shoulders almost brushed. When we sat on the couch, the distance between us felt intentional, measured, as if we were both trying to control something that had already begun slipping through our fingers. I tried to convince myself it was temporary. That grief was confusing us, that loneliness was distorting boundaries. But the truth was harder to face. I was starting to crave his presence in a way that went beyond comfort. It happened on a Saturday night. The house was quiet again. Rain tapped softly against the windows, steady and rhythmic. There was something about rain that always made emotions feel heavier. I had just stepped out of the shower, wrapped in one of those oversized towels that never quite feel secure. I didn't expect him to still be awake downstairs, but when I walked into the living room, there he was. He was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, the television playing softly in the background. The room was dim, lit only by the warm glow of a lamp beside him. The moment I entered, he looked up. And this time, he didn't look away. Our eyes locked, and neither of us spoke. The silence stretched longer than it should have. I felt exposed, not just physically, but emotionally. I could feel the shift in the room, thick and undeniable. I walked past him toward the kitchen, pretending I needed water. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat wasn't. Even with my back turned, I could feel his eyes on me. I told myself to go upstairs, to end the moment before it could become something else, but I didn't. Instead, I turned around and walked back into the living room. He slowly set his phone down on the table. His movements were careful, almost hesitant. His eyes searched mine, not demanding, not forcing, just asking. Without words. And I nodded. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was permission. He opened his arms, uncertain, and I stepped into them. At first, it was just a hug, familiar, safe. His hand rested on the small of my back, my cheek pressed against his chest. I could hear his heartbeat. It was fast. Mine was faster. For a moment, I thought that would be it. Just a hug. Just comfort. But then he pulled back slightly, just enough to look at me. His thumb brushed along the side of my face, slow and deliberate. His voice was barely above a whisper when he said, "You're so beautiful." That was the point where I should have stopped it. I should have stepped away. I should have reminded both of us who we were to each other. But I didn't. When his lips touched mine, it wasn't aggressive. It wasn't rushed. It was soft, hesitant. Like he was giving me time to pull away. And I didn't pull away. I kissed him back. Slowly, carefully. As if we were both pretending this wasn't happening, even while it was. The world didn't explode. There wasn't dramatic music or chaos. There was just rain against the windows and two people crossing a line that had once felt permanent. That was the first kiss. The first moment where denial became reality. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, breathing the same air, fully aware that something irreversible had begun. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about grief anymore. It was about to become something neither of us could ignore. The kiss should have been the end of it, a mistake. A moment we could blame on exhaustion, grief, confusion. We both could have stepped back, apologized, and drawn the line again. But that's not what happened. Instead, the silence after felt heavier than the kiss itself. We stayed there, standing in the middle of the living room, rain still tapping against the windows. His forehead rested lightly against mine. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. It was as if we were waiting for guilt to rush in and stop us. It didn't. He searched my face carefully, almost painfully, like he was looking for regret. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked quietly. That question mattered. It wasn't forceful, it wasn't assumed, it was careful. And I shook my head. That was the moment the line didn't just blur, it disappeared. We leaned into each other again, not rushed, not reckless. It felt slow, almost fragile, like two people afraid of breaking something already cracked. There was no wild urgency, no chaos, just closeness. Grief, loneliness, and unspoken need wrapped together in a way that felt intense but strangely calm. I know how that sounds. I know what it looks like from the outside. But in that room, it didn't feel twisted. It felt heavy, honest, like we were both reaching for something solid in a world that had fallen apart. When it became physical, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, confusing, tender in ways I'm almost afraid to describe. We didn't talk through it, we didn't analyze it, we just let it happen, like neither of us had the strength to stop the momentum anymore. And when it was over, we didn't separate immediately. We sat side by side on the couch, shoulders touching, breathing slowly. The television was still playing, but neither of us was watching. My head rested against him, and he wrapped an arm around me. It felt familiar, almost the same as it had weeks before when I slept beside him after he cried. But this was different. "I'm sorry," he whispered eventually. I swallowed. "Me too," I replied. The words were automatic, but neither of us moved away. That's when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't something we could pretend never happened. This wasn't a small slip, it was a shift. A moment that had changed the dynamic between us in a way that couldn't simply reset. That night, I didn't go upstairs. I slept in his bed. Not out of impulse, not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because, in that moment, lying beside him felt like the only place I didn't feel completely shattered. He held me close, and for a few hours, I wasn't grieving, I wasn't heartbroken. I wasn't questioning my worth. I was just not alone. Morning came too fast. I woke up slowly, disoriented for a second. Then reality hit. I rolled slightly, and there he was, already awake, staring at the ceiling. His face looked tense, like he hadn't slept at all. We didn't speak. We just lay there under the same sheets, but mentally miles apart. The air felt different in daylight, less forgiving, less soft. Finally, he cleared his throat. "You hungry?" It was such a normal question. Almost painfully normal. I nodded. We got dressed separately, quietly, avoiding each other's eyes. When we met in the kitchen, it felt like we were actors pretending nothing had changed. He poured coffee, I made toast. Our movements were careful, measured. At one point, our hands brushed when I passed him the butter. We both froze, then quickly pulled away. That tiny contact hurt more than the night before. He sat across from me, stirring his coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. I could tell he was searching for something to say. I was too. But where do you even begin after crossing a line like that? Finally, I broke the silence. "We don't have to talk about it right now." He nodded slowly. "I just don't want to hurt you." "You didn't," I said softly. "Not in the way you think." But the silence that followed was louder than any argument. We went through the rest of the day like nothing had happened. Cleaning, folding laundry, watching the news. But underneath every normal action was the same unspoken truth. We had crossed a line, and neither of us knew what that meant yet. That night, I stayed in my room. Not because we agreed to, not because we talked about it. I just couldn't bring myself to walk down that hallway again. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind, every look, every touch, every word. I kept asking myself the same question. What did it actually mean? Was it grief? Was it loneliness? Or was it something deeper that neither of us wanted to name? I barely slept. The next morning, we moved around each other carefully, like people trying not to reopen a wound. We kept our routines intact. Breakfast at the same time, coffee in the same mugs, the news playing in the background. If someone had walked into the house, they would have seen nothing unusual, but everything felt off. It was like watching a movie where the audio doesn't match the scene. Our words were normal, our tone was steady, but underneath it all was tension, not explosive tension, just awareness. Sometimes I would catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. His gaze would linger a second too long. Not hungry, not inappropriate, just thoughtful, heavy. And every time, my heart would start racing again. Then I'd look away. I started questioning everything. Did he regret it? Did he hate himself? Did he hate me for not stopping it? Did I regret it? The honest answer scared me. I didn't regret feeling close to him. I didn't regret the comfort. I didn't regret not feeling alone that night. What I regretted was not knowing what it made us now. Days passed, and we didn't mention it. Not once. We went back to cooking dinner together, watching television, folding laundry in the living room like we always had. But there was a distance now, thin, invisible, but present. Some nights I would lie awake replaying that Saturday in my head. The rain, the way he asked if I wanted him to stop, the way I shook my head. I would cry quietly, not because it felt wrong in the moment, but because I didn't know how to place it in my life. Was it love? That question terrified me the most. One evening, we were folding laundry together. It was something we had always done as a team. He was holding one of my shirts, carefully smoothing it before folding, when I finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Dad," I said. He looked up immediately. "What are we doing?" The room went still. He sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, like the weight of the question had physical force. "I don't know," he admitted after a long pause. "I think about that night every day. And I still don't know what it means." His honesty caught me off guard. "All I know," he continued, voice tight, "is I don't regret feeling close to you. I just don't know where we go from here." That last sentence broke something open in me. Because that was exactly how I felt. We weren't reckless people. We weren't trying to hurt anyone. We weren't acting out of thrill. We were two people who had lost the same woman, trying to survive in the same house filled with memories. And somewhere along the way, comfort became intimacy. I sat beside him, close but not touching. "So what now?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. And that silence felt bigger than anything else. Not cold, not angry, just lost. We stayed like that for a long time, neither of us reaching for the other. It wasn't about desire in that moment, it was about direction. We had stepped into something without understanding the cost, and now we were standing in the middle of it with no map. I realized then that ignoring it wouldn't fix it, pretending it never happened wouldn't erase it, but talking about it didn't magically make it clear either. We were stuck in between. Between comfort and guilt. Between connection and confusion. Between who we had always been, and who we might be becoming. And I didn't know which version of us was stronger. Now I'm sitting here telling this story to people I've never met because I don't know who else to ask. That's the truth. I don't trust my own thoughts anymore. Every time I try to make sense of what happened, I end up circling the same questions with no clear answer. After that conversation in the living room, nothing dramatically changed. There was no final decision, no clear boundary drawn, no declaration that it would never happen again. But there was an understanding that we couldn't keep pretending. The air in the house felt different after that. More aware, more fragile. We stopped sitting as close on the couch. We avoided late-night conversations in his bedroom. If one of us lingered too long in the hallway, the other would quietly step away. It was subtle, but intentional. Like we were both trying to protect something, maybe each other, maybe ourselves. But distance doesn't erase memory. Sometimes I'd walk past him and feel that same pull I felt on the night it happened. Not purely physical, not reckless, just familiar, safe, and that's what makes it so complicated. because the closeness didn't come from lust, it came from shared history, shared pain, shared loss. And that's what I keep struggling with. If it had been wild or careless, I could label it a mistake and move on. If it had been manipulative or forced, I could define it clearly as wrong and separate myself from it. But it wasn't like that. It was quiet, mutual, built slowly over weeks of grief and late-night conversations. Does that justify it? No. But it makes it harder to categorize. Some nights I still hear him walking around after midnight. I wonder if he's thinking about it too. I wonder if he replays that Saturday the way I do. I wonder if he's scared to look at me for too long because he doesn't trust what he might feel. We haven't crossed that line again, but we haven't fully closed the door on it either. That's the part that keeps me up at night. I've asked myself over and over, was it love, or was it grief dressed up as love? Was I searching for stability in the only man who had never abandoned me? Was he holding on to the closest piece of my mother he had left? Those questions don't have easy answers. What I do know is this: ignoring it won't make it disappear. Pretending it never happened won't protect either of us. Something real occurred, not fantasy, not imagination. And now we have to decide what to do with that reality. Do we talk about it again and set clear boundaries? Do we seek help outside these walls? Do we separate for a while and create space to breathe? Or do we continue living in this quiet tension, hoping time will untangle something that feels permanently knotted? I don't want to hurt him, and I don't want to lose him. He's still my father. He's still the man who raised me, who held my hand when I was a child, who taught me what kindness looks like. And maybe that's why this is so painful. Because love exists here, just not the kind we know how to define anymore. So I'm asking you honestly, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you confront it directly? Would you step away completely? Would you fight for distance, even if it feels like losing your safest person twice? I need perspective. I need clarity. Because right now, all I feel is the weight of something we never meant to create. If this story made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you question the complexity of grief and human connection, then share your thoughts below. Be honest. And if you want to hear more real, unfiltered stories like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.